You're probably scrolling through endless options, trying to figure out whether an electric tricycle is worth the investment or just another piece of equipment that will sit in the garage. It's a real dilemma: spend money on a ride that looks great on paper but ends up being a hassle, or hold out for something that actually fits your daily routine. I get it, because I've spent a lot of time reading through specs, watching videos, and listening to what people who actually use these things are saying. If you're on the fence about the EMOJO Bull electric tricycle for adults, this is the kind of honest breakdown you need before you click Add to Cart. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. First, let's talk about the core problem most buyers face: getting on and off a bike safely, especially if you're a senior, have limited mobility, or just don't want to wrestle with a high step-through frame. The Bull's low step-through design solves that pain point. The deck sits low enough that you can swing your leg over without a big lift, which feels almost like stepping onto a scooter rather than a traditional bike. In my experience with similar low-step models, the biggest barrier for new riders is the initial mounting, and this design removes that obstacle entirely. That means you can hop on after a grocery run, a quick trip to the post office, or even after a short walk without feeling winded before you've even started the motor. Now, what does the motor actually do for you? The 500-watt brushless motor delivers smooth, quiet power that feels more like a gentle push than a roar. When you twist the throttle, the bike accelerates predictably, which is a big confidence booster if you're riding in traffic or on a busy bike path. Because it's brushless, you don't have to worry about the kind of maintenance you'd see on older hub motors: no brushes to replace, no sparking. For a senior or someone who prefers low-maintenance gear, that reliability translates into fewer trips to a repair shop. Range anxiety is another common concern, and the Bull advertises up to 100 miles on a single charge. In real-world terms, that means you could comfortably commute 30 miles round-trip a few times a week and still have plenty left over for a weekend ride to the park. I've done the math with a 48-volt, 14-amp-hour battery and typical riding speeds. You'll probably see somewhere between 50 and 80 miles before you need to plug in, depending on terrain and how much you lean on the motor versus pedaling. That's enough to replace a car for short-haul errands, especially if you pair it with the rear basket that can hold up to 300 pounds. Imagine loading groceries, a small lawnmower, or a couple of bags of firewood. This trike can handle it without turning into a wobbly cart. Speaking of stability, the built-in rear differential is a feature that often gets lost in the hype. It allows the rear wheels to turn at slightly different speeds when you're navigating a corner, which keeps the trike from pulling to one side. In practice, you'll notice smoother turns on tight city streets and on gravel paths. The three-wheel layout already gives you a solid base, but the differential adds that extra layer of confidence, especially if you're carrying a heavy load in the rear basket. It's the kind of nuance that makes a big difference when you're trying to avoid a sudden tip-over on an uneven curb. The Bull also comes with a 7-speed internal gearbox, giving you more flexibility than a single-speed hub motor. If you're cruising on flat suburban streets, you'll stay in the higher gears and let the motor do most of the work. When you hit a hill or a rougher trail, you can drop down a gear to keep the motor from straining and preserve battery life. That adaptability is useful for people who live in hilly neighborhoods or who like to explore mixed terrain paths on weekends. It's not a high-performance racing transmission, but it's more than enough to keep the ride comfortable across varied topography. Now, who should actually consider buying this tricycle? If you're a senior who wants to stay active without the fear of falling, if you have limited balance and need that extra wheel for confidence, or if you simply want a practical way to carry groceries, tools, or gardening supplies, the Bull is a solid match. It shines for anyone who values easy mounting, cargo capacity, and a quiet, low-maintenance motor. It also makes sense for commuters who have a short to medium distance ride and want to avoid the sweat factor of a regular bike. On the flip side, you might want to skip this model if you're looking for a high-speed thrill ride or if you plan to take long, mountain bike-style off-road adventures. The 500-watt motor and 7-speed gearbox are tuned for comfort and utility, not for aggressive climbs or racing. Likewise, if you live in a city with strict bike lane regulations that only allow two-wheel vehicles, you could run into legal hurdles some.